All right, let's dive deep into distributive justice. Ready to go way beyond like basic economics.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about like the whole philosophy behind how should we share things in a society, right? The wealth, opportunities, even the burdens. And trust me, this stuff matters. This isn't just theoretical, it affects all of us.
It really does. What's interesting is even when politicians say like, "Oh, there's no consensus on economic issues," they're still making a distributive justice choice
Oh, interesting.
by keeping things the same, right? They're taking a stand even if it's like hidden in action.
So we're always taking a side, even if we don't realize it.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we go too far, can we define distributive justice? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the moral frameworks we use, like laws, institutions, even just social norms.
Okay.
They all shape how the benefits and burdens economically are spread around.
So it's like guidelines for a fair system, not just how things are, but how they should be.
Exactly. And it's important to remember no society perfectly matches any one theory.
Right.
These are ideals. They guide decisions, but they're not utopias.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's start with one that seems simple, like on the surface. Strict egalitarianism. Everyone gets an equal slice in the pie. Sounds fair, right? But how would that even work?
It's definitely trickier than it sounds. The first hurdle is like, what does equal even mean?
Right.
Is it same income for everyone or same well-being? And how do you even measure that?
Yeah, money seems obvious, but it doesn't cover everything that makes a good life.
Exactly. Plus, even if we could measure it perfectly, giving everyone the same exact stuff, super inefficient.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine everyone gets like 4 oranges, 6 apples, and 1 bicycle,
Okay.
regardless of what they need or like.
Oh, I see where you're going. Some people might be allergic to oranges. Somebody might need a car, not a bike.
Exactly. That's where Pareto efficiency comes in. It's this idea that by letting people trade and adjust what they have,
Right.
you can actually make some people better off without hurting anyone. Like if I love apples and you love oranges, we swap some, we're both happier.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So strict egalitarianism, it kind of ignores what people actually want and the fact that we can help each other out by trading. But what about time? Like things change, right? Do we want everyone to be equal at one point and then let it play out?
You're getting at another challenge. Do we aim for equal starting wealth? Like everyone lines up at the same starting line and then, races?
Yeah.
Or do we constantly adjust to keep everyone equal no matter what choices they make?
Yeah, I see. I see the appeal of the starting line thing, but I mean, some people get lucky breaks, others make bad choices. If we only care about that initial equality, uh, are we missing the bigger picture?
That's a key point, and it leads us to a theory that tries to address this, John Rawls' difference principle.
Okay, this one always throws me off a bit. I know it's a big deal, but I'm not sure I totally get it. So break it down for me. What's the main idea here?
So the difference principle, it's all about making sure those who are less off are as well off as possible.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be that everyone has the same amount, but like inequality is only cool if it helps the people at the very bottom.
So it's not about everyone being totally equal, but like setting a decent standard of living, a floor, but then, inequality above that is okay as long as it lifts everyone up. Kind of like rising tide lifts all boats, even if some of them are yachts.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Imagine, say, higher earners, they keep more of their money.
Okay.
And because of that, they invest more, maybe create jobs, boost the economy. If that helps the people with the lowest incomes too, then Rawls would be like, okay, that inequality, that's justified.
I could see the logic there. But doesn't that kind of ignore, like, people's feelings? I mean, even if everyone's getting richer, if there's a huge gap, won't that cause resentment, instability even?
That's a super important point. Critics of the difference principle say even if the poorest are better off in like absolute terms,
Right, right.
that huge gap creates problems. Power imbalances, less solidarity, even like political rights don't feel as meaningful when you're so far behind. So even if your basic needs are met, the gap itself is a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Like the difference principle might make sure everyone has something, but it doesn't really care how high the top goes, right?
Exactly. And there are other critiques too. The philosopher G.A. Cohen, he argued like, do we need to give huge salaries to talented people to get them to contribute?
Oh, interesting.
He thought in a truly just society, people would be motivated by fairness, wanting to help others, not just big paychecks.
So in that ideal world, we wouldn't need to, like, bribe people to do the right thing. Kind of makes you wonder if we're, I don't know, taking advantage of people's talents by saying, help us and you'll be rich. That's pretty deep.
It is. It really gets to the core of how we value different kinds of work. But shifting gears a bit, let's talk about equality of opportunity. That comes up a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, most people agree that like discrimination based on race or gender, that's wrong. Everyone deserves a fair shot. But how do we like actually define a level playing field? Is it just about, no discrimination or does it go further?
That's the tricky part. That idea, level playing field, it sounds great, but it gets complicated fast. Formal equality of opportunity, that's about removing those barriers, like make sure a qualified woman has the same chance at a job as a man.
Right, right.
But then it's like, okay, what about all the other stuff that affects your chances?
Yeah, like your family's wealth, if you had good schools, even just like being born good at something. None of that is really your choice. Is it fair to let that decide so much?
And that's where luck egalitarianism comes in. It says inequalities are only okay if they're because of choices you made, not just random luck. So if someone's born into poverty or has a disability, society should step in to even things out.
Makes sense, but how do you measure how much of someone's success is talent, hard work, or just plain luck? Seems impossible.
It really raises some deep questions like what even is talent? How do you measure effort? Can you ever separate those from the circumstances you were born into? Philosophers are still debating this stuff.
So we keep running into this tension, right? We want to hold people responsible for their choices, but also acknowledge that life isn't always fair from the get-go.
You got it. And different theories try to balance those in different ways. Like utilitarianism, for example, it cares less about how things are distributed and more about the overall well-being.
So less about who has what, more about making sure the total happiness or well-being is as high as possible. Does that mean utilitarianism would be okay, like sacrificing some people's interests if it made the majority happier? That seems kind of risky.
That's one of the big criticisms. Yeah, people argue that it could be used to justify stuff that seems wrong, like punish an innocent person if it stops a riot or exploit a small group to benefit a bigger one.
Yeah, I could see how that could go too far. Do utilitarians have any, like, responses to that?
They would say their theory actually encourages thinking long term and building institutions that prevent those worst case scenarios. A system focused on everyone's well being is more likely to make everyone happy and secure in the long run, even if there are tough choices along the way.
So it's like they're looking at the big picture, not just quick wins that screw someone over.
Right. But there's another challenge for utilitarianism, how to deal with prejudice. Like, if a lot of people have racist views, should we count those equally when we're calculating overall happiness, even if it leads to, like, racist policies?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Sounds like utilitarianism could end up justifying some pretty messed up stuff if that's what the majority wants.
That's a valid concern. Makes you wonder if, even with its focus on the greater good, can it really handle basic moral principles like justice and individual rights?
Okay, I'm seeing how complex this is. We've covered a lot. But there's one more approach I'm curious about. Desert-based principles. The idea that you get what you deserve based on how much you contribute seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's got that intuitive appeal, right? Hard work, innovation, those should be rewarded. But like all these theories, there are some tricky questions underneath.
Like what?
Well, first, how do you define contribution? Is it just about how much money you make? Or does, like, artistic stuff count? Community service?
Right, and even if we agree on what counts, how do you measure it fairly? Some jobs are way harder or riskier than others. Should those folks be rewarded more, even if they don't produce as much like economic output?
Another layer, yeah. And then there's how desert-based principles handle luck. Is it fair to punish those who aren't as naturally talented or who had a rough start, even if they're working their butts off?
So we're back to that same tension, individual effort versus acknowledging not everyone starts at the same place.
Exactly. It keeps popping up. Now, before we wrap up, let's tackle one that takes a very different approach. Libertarianism.
Ooh, yeah, the freedom folks. I'm always interested in how they see this. It seems like they have a different starting point than the others.
They definitely do. They put huge emphasis on individual liberty and property rights. Basically, if you got something justly, you get to keep it, no matter how unequal things are overall.
So if you acquired it fairly, it's yours, period. That's a pretty strong stance.
Yeah, Robert Nozick, he had this theory, the entitlement theory. Any redistribution beyond, like, basic protection from theft is seen as theft itself. Taxes, in this view, are like violating your property rights.
Wow, so no forced redistribution. But how do you even define just acquisition to begin with? I mean, history's full of like land grabs, colonialism, all that. How do libertarians deal with that?
That's a major challenge for them, yeah. Like, how do current property rights square with a past full of injustice? Even Nozick, he admitted this and said we need a principle of rectification to fix past wrongs.
But how do you even untangle all that? Centuries of like unfairness and power imbalances. Seems impossible.
It's a massive undertaking, and critics say it's basically impossible to apply Nozick's theory in a world shaped by all that inequality.
So even if you love the idea of individual liberty, the messy reality of history throws a wrench in the gears.
You got it. And that brings us to another perspective that highlights how these traditional theories often fall short, feminist perspectives.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. I feel like a lot of theories focus on like abstract ideas, rights, without really seeing how different people experience inequality differently.
You're right on the mark. And feminist philosophers, they've been pointing this out for a long time. They say these theories act all neutral, but they ignore how gender roles, power dynamics, especially within families, affect everything.
So it's like recognizing that the personal is political. Like who stays home with the kids, who does more caregiving, that has huge economic effects, but it's not usually seen as like a political issue.
Exactly. Traditional families often put women at a disadvantage economically, and feminists are like, hey, equal opportunities at work don't mean much if the playing field's already tilted at home. It's like saying anyone can enter the race, but some people have to start miles behind or carry extra weight.
Powerful image. And I'm guessing there's like a lot of variety within feminist thought on this. What kind of like solutions do they propose?
Oh yeah, tons of different viewpoints. Some want to like completely restructure things, dismantle patriarchal systems. Others focus on reforming what we have, making it fairer. But a common thread is any good theory of distributive justice has to deal with power, social norms, people's actual lived experiences, not just abstract ideas, but making a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their gender or other identities.
Wow, this deep dive, it's been a lot. Fascinating, but also kind of overwhelming. So many theories, so many nuances. What are some like key takeaways you hope our listeners walking away with?
I think the biggest one is distributive justice isn't just some theoretical debate, you know? It's about choices we make as a society, choices that have huge effects on real people. Every law, policy, institution, it reflects values about fairness.
So it's like a call to action. Don't just accept things at face value. Ask who benefits, who pays the price. And is this really the most just way to do things?
Absolutely. And we've seen how these theories, they're always evolving. They influence each other. Real world events shape them. The more we engage with these ideas, the better we can participate in those crucial conversations about like what kind of world we want to live in.
Okay, listener, your challenge. Next time there's a debate about, I don't know, economic policy, social programs, try to spot the distributive justice stuff going on underneath. It's like a secret code that unlocks a whole new level of understanding.
And if we accept that luck plays a role, like many of these theories say, it raises another question. How do we make a system that's both fair and encourages people to work hard, be innovative? It's tough, but definitely worth thinking about as we grapple with all this.
Food for thought. Keep questioning, keep exploring, keep diving deep. Yeah, it makes you think for sure. But before we get totally lost in like philosophy land, can we bring it back down to earth for a sec? These theories are all well and good, but how do they actually like play out in the real world?
That's a great point. One of the most obvious places you see these principles is in debates about, taxes and social programs.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Like someone arguing for higher taxes on the wealthy to fund programs for the poor, they might be using Rawls' difference principle, right? That inequality is only okay if it helps the least well off.
Okay, yeah, I see the connection. What about something like universal health care? Which of these principles would like support that?
Oh, universal healthcare, you could argue for that from a few different angles. Like a utilitarian might say, hey, it improves everyone's health, so that's good for overall well-being. Or an egalitarian might say, equal access to healthcare, that's a basic right.
So even one policy can be justified with different ideas, huh?
Exactly, and it shows how these principles can be used to like analyze and debate all sorts of political and economic stuff. Like take inheritance taxes. Someone who wants high inheritance taxes might be thinking about luck egalitarianism, right? Trying to level the playing field by reducing those advantages passed down through families.
Right, right. Like minimizing the impact of, what is it, the birth lottery. But wouldn't a libertarian say, hey, it's my money, I can do what I want with it, even if it means giving it to my kids?
Exactly. They'd probably see high inheritance taxes as violating property rights. They might say individuals should be free to do whatever they want with their wealth, even if it leads to inequality for the next generation.
Okay, so understanding these principles can really help you figure out why people believe what they believe about economics and politics, huh? It's like a whole new way of seeing things.
I think so. That's one of the best things about political philosophy, right? It gives you a framework to understand not just people's positions, but the reasons behind them.
It's like learning a new language, the language of distributive justice. But I gotta say, this whole fairness and justice thing, it's a little daunting. Where do we even start trying to make the world more just?
Well, first, realize there's no one right answer, no magic formula. These are complex problems, no easy solutions.
So it's not about finding the right answer. It's about having these conversations, debating, and always trying to move towards a more just world.
Exactly. And being aware of our own biases, recognizing that people have different values. What seems fair to me might seem totally unfair to you.
That's true. Makes me realize how important it is to, like, really listen to other perspectives, be open to changing our minds.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, this isn't just about big theories. It's about our daily choices, the policies we support, how we treat each other. We all have a role to play.
So, listener, here's something to think about. What values guide your views on fairness? Which of these principles resonates with you? And where do you see these ideas at play in your own life, your community? Keep asking those questions, keep exploring.
Keep the conversation going.